Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's Thursday, so it's time for another freight market update where we take a look at the general market, including capacity, diesel prices, what's happening with volumes, rejections, and the spot market in general. And then we go into details as to what is going on with dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds on the spot market. And at the end, as always, we're going to talk about data versus experience, and I'm going to share with you the 5 stages of grief I went through every single day this week when booking freight. Ready? Let's go! So, first of all, general volume in the general freight market, not just the spot market, decreased by almost 2% week over week. Funny enough, rejections increased by almost 11%. Well, that's a stretch, 10.62%, and are currently at 5.52%. Spot volumes also increased week over week, although it is comparing up to last week. So it's not quite for this week. They increased by 0.5% if we take a look at all equipment types across the board. Spot rates did not change at all, and on average, for all equipment types, they're at $2.42 per mile. All right, now let's talk about diesel prices. And first, we take a look at the price at the pump. This is the price you see when you are refueling. So the cheapest ones, they didn't really change. Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi are less than $3.20 per gallon on average. The most expensive are actually California and Washington this week with over $4 per gallon. But the question is, what are the raw diesel prices? Again, thank you to the person who said that I should include that map. The raw diesel prices are less IFTA. And in that case, things change. Illinois is actually the cheapest at less than $2.90 per gallon. And the most expensive is the West Coast and the Northeast. Now, again, speaking of diesel prices, let's take a look at what happened on a national average week over week. This is data from AAA. So as of today, diesel prices are averaging $3.54 per gallon. They went down by almost 2 cents since last week. They are down 8 cents month over month and down 43 cents year over year. All right, now on to capacity, or more specifically, the change in the number of MC numbers. We have been seeing net increases over the past month or so, and it's another increase this week. It's lower than last week, but it's a net increase of 89 carriers. So more carriers came in than left. Now, someone had a theory that this might be the folks who were working for a company or leased onto a company that are getting their own numbers and trying their hand at this market. Let's start diving into specifics, starting with those dry vans. So this is the data I get from FTR Intel on the spot market. Week over week, dry vans saw a 1 cent increase in rates. They're now at $1.80 on average. Year over year, rates are 1% higher. Volumes also saw an increase by 0.1% for dry van, and they are 1% higher on the spot market than this time last year. Let's take a look at some maps. This is the load map that I make using truck stop data, and you can see the darker an area is, the more loads there are. The most loads, over 1,000, are in Texas, Illinois, and Georgia. But as always, I say this every week, if you take a step back and look at this map, you will see that if we're looking at a cluster of states together, it's better to stay in the Midwest, where there are more loads in general than anywhere else. All right, let's take a look at capacity. Capacity tends to follow loads, although a lot of dry vans end up in Pennsylvania, where there are maybe not as many loads as there are trucks, but yeah, a lot of them hang out in California, Texas, and the Midwest, as well as the South. Now, let's take a look at the load to truck ratio. It's a little bit different this week. So anything that you see as red is overcapacity. It's just divided into how much of an overcapacity it is. The darker it is, the worse it is. So for example, Pennsylvania and New Mexico, this is really overcapacity. There are 0 to 0.2 loads per truck, and so on and so forth. Anything blue is equilibrium. It's about 1 to 2 loads per truck. The reason I say be careful with equilibrium is because sometimes brokers post one load 200 different times, or people do not post their trucks, which kind of screws up the load to truck ratio a little bit. Anything light green, Louisiana and Illinois, this is under capacity, 2 to 3 loads per truck. And Wyoming is another under capacity state, 3 to 4 loads per truck. Now, the reason I put a star next to Illinois is because it's by far the most workable state right now for dry vans. There are a lot of loads. There is no overcapacity there. So Illinois is the place that is relatively better compared to everywhere else. All right, let's take a look at what's going on with reefers. Everything green here as well. So reefers actually saw a 9 cent per mile increase week over week. Rates are 3% higher than this time last year. Volumes also increased by 1.4% week over week on the spot market and are 5.5% higher than this time last year. Okay, let's take a look at some maps. So this is the volume map for reefers. I know that truck stop is not the load board of choice, not the primary load board of choice for reefers, but it gives you an idea. Most loads are coming out of California, Texas, Georgia, and in general in the Midwest. But something I noticed right away is that a lot of the map is now very, very light blue, which means that in the majority of the market, loads are dwindling away for reefers. In some areas, they are increasing though. Capacity-wise, tends to stick with where the loads are. Texas is by far the most popular place to end up with a reefer. Load to truck ratio, the worst of the worst overcapacity is Montana, Maine, New Hampshire, and then the lighter red it gets, it's still overcapacity, it's just not as bad as like Montana, for example. Lots of equilibrium states, but again, be very careful. It still surprises me that Washington and Oregon are doing so poorly for reefers, although I know it's not quite the season yet. Now, undercapacity exists in Wisconsin, Idaho. More undercapacity exists in South Dakota, and the most undercapacity exists in Delaware with 7.33 loads per truck. Nevertheless, I put a star next to Wisconsin because not only is there undercapacity, it also has a decent amount of loads. So if I had to choose a state that is better for reefers, it would be Wisconsin, most likely from the data that I see. All right, let's move on to those flatbeds. So flatbeds are not doing very well week over week. They actually saw a 2 cent per mile decrease week over week. Year over year, however, the rates are 6% higher. Volumes decreased by 0.6% week over week, which I think is a gross underestimation. And volumes year over year decreased by 28% for flatbeds on the spot market. Okay, loads and trucks. So in terms of loads, it really doesn't change much. I did see that loads really did decrease, but nevertheless, the pattern remains the same. It's the South, it's the Midwest that has more loads for flatbeds. Capacity always follows where the loads are. A lot of them do tend to end up in Florida, unfortunately, just because this is where sometimes the rates pay better and people are desperate enough to take something to Florida just to cover a couple of days for maybe a better rate per mile. Load to truck ratio. So again, the worst of the worst is New Mexico, North Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And then, there is still overcapacity for the most part, but not as bad in Illinois, Maine, Virginia, Texas. Equilibrium, be careful. I like to think of equilibrium as a hit or miss, again, because we can't control how many times a broker posts a load or a carrier posts a truck. Under capacity wise, so 2 to 3 loads per truck exist in Maryland, South Carolina, and Oregon. 3 to 4 loads per truck exists in Arkansas and Louisiana. 4 to 5 loads per truck in Alabama, and 11.99 loads in Mississippi. No surprise, Mississippi always does better. I starred 4 states here: Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, because these 4 are pretty much consistently places where there are a ton of loads compared to the rest of the market, plus there are not enough trucks there. So if you stick to these areas, yeah, you might be getting better rates than the rest of the market. It's just very difficult to stick to those areas. All right, now data versus experience, and the biggest news of all. I already made a short on this, but it's worth repeating here for those that did not see that short. So, brokers apparently are starting to make sure that the driver hauling the load you book is an English speaker, a proficient English speaker. If this trend starts spreading, then capacity doesn't need to physically leave in order for something to change in the market. The reason I know this is because it happened to me yesterday. The broker refused to send me a rate con, and this is a broker I have been working for since the beginning, since I started in 2019. He refused to send me a rate confirmation until he was able to speak to my guy and ensure that he speaks fluent English. And only then did he send me the rate confirmation. Now, when I posted the short on YouTube, and I also made a post on X talking about it, I got quite a few folks saying that they experienced something similar recently. And the reason this is happening, and someone called it in my previous video, is that most likely brokers and shippers are going to be wary of booking loads with folks who are maybe not as proficient in English just because they're scared of that load getting stuck on a truck that is put out of service potentially. So yeah, that's some interesting news. But apart from that, in terms of the market is crap. So every day of this week, and I've been booking loads every single day of this week, I went through the 5 stages of grief. Denial. All right, let's take a look at what they have from Minneapolis. Perfect. What the hell? Hi there, I just logged into my load board. I was wondering if any systems are down. My side is working correctly, but there are just no loads. I know it's a weird question, but there are 18 loads out of Minneapolis, Minnesota for a flatbed, which is not normal. I was wondering if something is down, maybe someone cannot log in or, oh, so everything works. Got it. Okay, thank you very much. Anger. What is going on? $1.61? To Rhode Island? Are you joking? Are you out of your fucking mind, you fucking piece of shit? Are you fucking kidding me right now? Bargaining. Hey there, big guy. So I have a proposition for you. Please, if you make a load up here, I swear I will never be mean to those telemarketers or scam callers again. I'll be a good girl, I'll be polite, and I won't take out my anger on them. Just make something appear. Depression. And acceptance. All right, it's gonna be fine. Market is crap, nothing new here. I just have to wait and something will come out. For us this week, booking loads was pretty much only about the relationships with brokers. Now, I have just a few brokers that I have built a wonderful relationship with over the years. These are small mom and pop brokers where the owner is the broker and the accounting is done by their spouse. So that's how we have been running this week in particular. What were your experiences this week? Was it better? Was it worse? If you're on a reefer or on a dry van, how are you doing? Because I don't have as much visibility into that market simply because I'm a flatbed carrier and I can speak definitely from experience on the flatbed side, but curious to hear your experiences with reefers and dry vans this week. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.